The Battle of Plassey, a turning point in Indian history. The Battle of Plassey, fought on June 23, 1757, was a decisive conflict that marked the beginning of British dominance in India. It was not just a military engagement but a political and economic turning point that reshaped the subcontinent's future. The battle took place near the village of Plassey, Palashi, in Bengal, between the forces of the British East India Company, led by Robert Clive, and the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Daulah. The outcome of the battle laid the foundation for British colonial rule in India, which would last for nearly 2 centuries. Historical context: the decline of the Mughal Empire. By the mid-18th century, the Mughal Empire, which had once ruled most of the Indian subcontinent, was in decline. Regional powers like the Marathas, Sikhs, and various Nawabs, provincial governors, began asserting their independence. Bengal, one of the wealthiest provinces of the Mughal Empire, was under the rule of Nawab Siraj-ud-Daulah, a young and inexperienced leader who faced internal dissent and external threats. The rise of the British East India Company. The British East India Company, established in 1600, initially came to India for trade. Over time, the company expanded its influence, establishing trading posts and fortifications in key locations like Calcutta, Madras, and Bombay. The company's growing economic and military power brought it into conflict with local rulers, particularly in Bengal, where it sought to monopolize trade and resources. Tensions between Siraj-ud-Daulah and the British Siraj-ud-Daulah, who became the Nawab of Bengal in 1756, viewed the British East India Company as a threat to his authority. The company's fortifications in Calcutta and its refusal to pay taxes angered the Nawab. In 1756, Siraj-ud-Daulah captured Calcutta, leading to the infamous incident of the Black Hole of Calcutta, where many British prisoners allegedly died due to overcrowding. This event galvanized the British to retaliate. Key figures in the battle: Robert Clive, a British officer and administrator. Clive was the commander of the British forces during the Battle of Plassey. His strategic acumen and ability to exploit divisions within the Nawab's camp were crucial to the British victory. Siraj-ud-Daulah, the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Daulah, was a young and ambitious ruler but lacked the experience and support of his nobles. His authoritarian style and conflicts with key figures like Mir Jafar weakened his position. Mir Jafar, a prominent noble in Siraj-ud-Daulah's court, Mir Jafar conspired with the British to overthrow the Nawab. In exchange for his betrayal, he was promised the throne of Bengal. Mir Mudun, a loyal general of Siraj-ud-Daulah, Mir Mudun fought bravely during the battle but was killed in action, which demoralized the Nawab's forces. Jagat Seth, a wealthy banker and financier, Jagat Seth played a behind-the-scenes role in undermining Siraj-ud-Daulah by funding the British and supporting Mir Jafar's conspiracy. The Battle of Plassey events and strategies prelude to the battle. After the fall of Calcutta, the British sent reinforcements under Robert Clive to recapture the city. Clive successfully retook Calcutta and then sought to consolidate British power in Bengal. He formed alliances with disgruntled nobles in Siraj-ud-Daulah's court, most notably Mir Jafar, who agreed to betray the Nawab in exchange for the throne. The Battle of Plassey was fought on June 23, 1757, near the Bhagirathi River. The British forces, numbering around 3,000, faced Siraj-ud-Daulah's army of approximately 50,000. Despite the numerical disadvantage, Clive's forces had superior artillery and discipline. The battle began with an artillery exchange, but the tide turned when Mir Jafar and his troops refused to fight, effectively abandoning Siraj-ud-Daulah. The death of Mir Mudun further weakened the Nawab's resolve. Realizing the betrayal, Siraj-ud-Daulah fled the battlefield, and his army disintegrated. Outcome: the British emerged victorious with minimal casualties. Siraj-ud-Daulah was captured and later executed, and Mir Jafar was installed as the new Nawab of Bengal. However, Mir Jafar was a puppet ruler, and real power rested with the British East India Company. Consequences of the battle: British ascendancy in Bengal. The victory at Plassey gave the British control over Bengal's wealth, including its lucrative trade and revenue. This marked the beginning of British political and economic dominance in India. The drain of wealth: the British exploited Bengal's resources, leading to economic exploitation and the impoverishment of the region. The wealth extracted from Bengal fueled Britain's Industrial Revolution. Consolidation of British power: the Battle of Plassey set a precedent for the British to use diplomacy, alliances, and military force to expand their control over other parts of India. Decline of Indian states. The battle exposed the weaknesses of Indian rulers and their inability to unite against foreign powers. It also highlighted the role of internal betrayal and corruption in the downfall of Indian states. Foundation of the British Raj. The events at Plassey laid the groundwork for the establishment of the British Raj, which would rule India until 1947. Legacy of the Battle of Plassey. The Battle of Plassey is often regarded as the starting point of British colonial rule in India. It marked the transition from trade to territorial conquest and set the stage for the eventual colonization of the entire subcontinent. The battle also underscored the importance of political intrigue and alliances in shaping the course of history. For India, the Battle of Plassey was a moment of profound change. It signaled the end of indigenous rule and the beginning of a long period of foreign domination. The economic and social consequences of British rule, including the exploitation of resources and the disruption of traditional industries, had lasting impacts on Indian society. The Battle of Plassey was more than just a military confrontation. It was a watershed moment in Indian history. It demonstrated the power of strategy, diplomacy, and betrayal in shaping the destiny of nations. The British victory at Plassey paved the way for their eventual domination of India, while also highlighting the vulnerabilities of Indian rulers and the complexities of colonial expansion. As we reflect on the Battle of Plassey, it serves as a reminder of the intricate interplay of power, ambition, and historical forces that continue to shape our world today. The long-term impacts of the Battle of Plassey on Indian politics. The Battle of Plassey, fought on June 23, 1757, is often regarded as a pivotal moment in Indian history. This battle, which took place near the village of Plassey, Palashi, in Bengal, marked the beginning of British colonial rule in India. The confrontation was between the British East India Company, led by Robert Clive, and the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Daulah, along with his French allies. The British victory at Plassey had profound and far-reaching consequences for Indian politics, economy, society, and culture. This article delves into the long-term impacts of the Battle of Plassey on Indian politics, exploring how this single event set the stage for nearly 2 centuries of British dominance and shaped the trajectory of Indian political development. The prelude to the Battle of Plassey. To understand the long-term impacts of the Battle of Plassey, it is essential to examine the context in which it occurred. The mid-18th century was a period of significant political fragmentation in India. The Mughal Empire, which had once been a dominant force in the subcontinent, was in decline. Regional powers, such as the Marathas, the Nawabs of Bengal, and the Nizam of Hyderabad, were vying for control, creating a power vacuum that European trading companies, particularly the British and the French, sought to exploit. The British East India Company, established in 1600, had initially come to India for trade. However, as the Mughal Empire weakened, the company began to involve itself in local politics, seeking to secure its trading interests and expand its influence. The French East India Company, established in 1664, was also active in India, leading to frequent conflicts between the 2 European powers. In Bengal, the Nawab Siraj-ud-Daulah had recently ascended to the throne. His relationship with the British East India Company was strained due to the company's fortification of Calcutta and its refusal to pay taxes. Siraj-ud-Daulah's capture of Calcutta in 1756, followed by the infamous Black Hole incident, where many British prisoners died, further escalated tensions. The British, under Robert Clive, sought to retaliate and secure their position in Bengal, leading to the Battle of Plassey. The Battle of Plassey, a turning point. The Battle of Plassey was not a large-scale military engagement, but rather a strategic and political maneuver. The British forces, numbering around 3,000, faced Siraj-ud-Daulah's army of approximately 50,000. However, the British had secured the support of key figures within the Nawab's court, most notably Mir Jafar, the commander of the Nawab's army. Mir Jafar's betrayal, along with the defection of other key officers, ensured a British victory. The immediate aftermath of the battle saw Siraj-ud-Daulah captured and executed, and Mir Jafar installed as the new Nawab of Bengal. However, Mir Jafar was a puppet ruler, with real power resting in the hands of the British East India Company. The company extracted significant concessions from Mir Jafar, including the right to collect revenue in Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa, effectively giving them control over the region's economy. The long-term political impacts of the Battle of Plassey. The Battle of Plassey had profound and lasting impacts on Indian politics. These impacts can be categorized into several key areas. The establishment of British political dominance. The most immediate and obvious impact of the Battle of Plassey was the establishment of British political dominance in India. The victory at Plassey marked the beginning of the British East India Company's transformation from a trading entity to a political power. The company's control over Bengal, one of the wealthiest regions in India, provided it with the resources and revenue necessary to expand its influence across the subcontinent. Over the next few decades, the British East India Company engaged in a series of wars and alliances that allowed it to extend its control over much of India. The defeat of the French at the Battle of Wandawash in 1760 and the subsequent Treaty of Paris in 1763 eliminated French influence in India, leaving the British as the dominant European power. The company's victories in the Anglo-Mysore Wars, 1767 to 1799, the Anglo-Maratha Wars, 1775 to 1818, and the Anglo-Sikh Wars, 1845 to 1849, further consolidated its control. By the mid-19th century, the British East India Company had established itself as the de facto ruler of India, with the Mughal emperor reduced to a figurehead. The company's political dominance was formalized in 1858, following the Indian Rebellion of 1857, when the British Crown assumed direct control over India, establishing the British Raj. The erosion of indigenous political structures. The Battle of Plassey and the subsequent expansion of British control led to the erosion of indigenous political structures in India. The Mughal Empire, already in decline, was further weakened by the loss of Bengal, one of its most prosperous provinces. The British East India Company's policy of subsidiary alliances, introduced by Lord Wellesley in the late 18th century, further undermined the authority of Indian rulers. Under the subsidiary alliance system, Indian rulers were required to accept British protection and station British troops within their territories. In return, they had to pay for the maintenance of these troops and cede control of their foreign policy to the British. This system effectively reduced Indian rulers to puppets, with real power resting in the hands of the British. The erosion of indigenous political structures had long-term consequences for Indian politics. The traditional systems of governance, which had evolved over centuries, were dismantled, leading to a loss of political autonomy and self-governance. The British introduced a centralized administrative system, which, while efficient, was alien to the Indian political tradition and contributed to the alienation of the Indian population from their own political institutions. The impact on Indian society and economy. The political changes brought about by the Battle of Plassey had significant social and economic consequences. The British East India Company's control over Bengal's revenue allowed it to extract wealth from the region, leading to economic exploitation and impoverishment. The company's policies, such as the Permanent Settlement of 1793, which fixed land revenue demands, placed a heavy burden on Indian peasants and led to widespread agrarian distress. The economic exploitation of India by the British had long-term social consequences. The traditional agrarian economy was disrupted, leading to the decline of rural industries and the impoverishment of the peasantry. The introduction of British manufactured goods, particularly textiles, undermined Indian handicrafts and led to the deindustrialization of the Indian economy. The social impact of British rule was also significant. The British introduced a system of education that emphasized Western knowledge and values, leading to the emergence of a Western-educated elite. This elite, while benefiting from British rule, also became the driving force behind the Indian nationalist movement, which sought to end British colonial rule and establish an independent India. The rise of Indian nationalism. The long-term political impact of the Battle of Plassey also includes the rise of Indian nationalism. The economic exploitation, social disruption, and political subjugation brought about by British rule created a sense of resentment and discontent among the Indian population. This discontent found expression in various forms of resistance, including armed uprisings, peasant revolts, and political movements. The Indian Rebellion of 1857, often referred to as the First War of Indian Independence, was a significant moment in the history of Indian nationalism. Although the rebellion was ultimately crushed by the British, it marked the beginning of a more organized and widespread resistance to colonial rule. The rebellion also led to the end of the British East India Company's rule and the establishment of direct British Crown control over India. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the Indian nationalist movement gained momentum, with the formation of the Indian National Congress in 1885 and the emergence of leaders such as Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and Subhas Chandra Bose. The nationalist movement sought to achieve self-rule, Swaraj, for India and to end British colonial domination. The long-term impact of the Battle of Plassey on Indian politics can thus be seen in the rise of Indian nationalism and the eventual achievement of Indian independence in 1947. The political, economic, and social changes brought about by British rule created the conditions for the emergence of a modern Indian nation-state, with a democratic political system and a commitment to social and economic justice. The legacy of colonial rule, the Battle of Plassey, and the subsequent establishment of British colonial rule left a lasting legacy on Indian politics. The centralized administrative system introduced by the British, with its emphasis on bureaucracy and the rule of law, became the foundation of the Indian state after independence. The Indian Civil Service, ICS, which was established by the British, continued to play a key role in the administration of independent India. The British also introduced a system of representative government, with the establishment of legislative councils and the gradual extension of voting rights. Although these institutions were initially limited in scope and designed to serve British interests, they provided a framework for the development of democratic governance in India. However, the legacy of colonial rule was not entirely positive. The economic exploitation and social disruption caused by British rule left deep scars on Indian society. The partition of India in 1947, which led to the creation of Pakistan and one of the largest mass migrations in history, was a direct consequence of the communal politics introduced by the British. The long-term impact of the Battle of Plassey on Indian politics can thus be seen in the complex legacy of colonial rule. While the British introduced modern political and administrative institutions, they also left behind a legacy of economic exploitation, social division, and political fragmentation that continues to shape Indian politics to this day. The Battle of Plassey was a turning point in Indian history, marking the beginning of British colonial rule and setting the stage for nearly 2 centuries of political, economic, and social change. The long-term impacts of the battle on Indian politics were profound and far-reaching, shaping the trajectory of Indian political development and leaving a lasting legacy that continues to influence the country today. The establishment of British political dominance, the erosion of indigenous political structures, the impact on Indian society and economy, the rise of Indian nationalism, and the legacy of colonial rule are all key aspects of the long-term impact of the Battle of Plassey on Indian politics. These impacts highlight the complex and multifaceted nature of colonial rule and its enduring influence on the political landscape of modern India. As India continues to navigate the challenges of the 21st century, the legacy of the Battle of Plassey and the colonial period remains a critical part of its historical consciousness. Understanding this legacy is essential for comprehending the complexities of Indian politics and the ongoing struggle for social and economic justice in the world's largest democracy. How did the weather conditions influence the outcome of the Battle of Plassey? The Battle of Plassey, fought on June 23, 1757, is one of the most significant battles in the history of the Indian subcontinent. It marked the beginning of British dominance in India and the decline of the Mughal Empire. The battle was fought between the British East India Company, led by Robert Clive, and the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Daulah, along with his French allies. While the battle is often analyzed in terms of military strategy, political intrigue, and economic motives, one aspect that is often overlooked is the role of weather conditions in determining the outcome of the battle. This article delves into the influence of weather on the Battle of Plassey, exploring how climatic factors may have tipped the scales in favor of the British. The prelude to the Battle of Plassey. Before delving into the specifics of the weather conditions, it is essential to understand the context in which the Battle of Plassey took place. The mid-18th century was a period of intense rivalry among European powers for control over trade routes and territories in India. The British East India Company and the French East India Company were the primary contenders, with both seeking to expand their influence in the lucrative Bengal region. Siraj-ud-Daulah, the Nawab of Bengal, was a young and inexperienced ruler who had recently ascended to the throne. His relationship with the British East India Company was strained due to several factors, including the company's fortification of Calcutta without his permission and their support for his political rivals. The British, on the other hand, were determined to secure their economic interests in Bengal and saw an opportunity to weaken the Nawab's authority. The immediate trigger for the Battle of Plassey was the Black Hole of Calcutta incident, where several British prisoners were allegedly suffocated to death in a small prison cell. This event outraged the British and led to a military response. Robert Clive, a seasoned military commander, was tasked with leading the British forces against Siraj-ud-Daulah. The role of weather in military campaigns. Weather has always played a crucial role in military campaigns throughout history. From the freezing winters that thwarted Napoleon's invasion of Russia to the heavy rains that bogged down the German advance during the Battle of the Bulge in World War II, climatic conditions have often determined the success or failure of military operations. In the context of the Battle of Plassey, the weather conditions on the day of the battle and in the preceding weeks had a significant impact on the strategies and outcomes of both sides. The weather conditions leading up to the Battle of Plassey took place during the monsoon season in Bengal, a period characterized by heavy rainfall, high humidity, and unpredictable weather patterns. The monsoon season typically begins in June and lasts until September, with the peak rainfall occurring in July and August. The weather in the weeks leading up to the battle was marked by intermittent rains, which created challenging conditions for both the British and the Nawab's forces. Impact on terrain and mobility. The heavy rains in the weeks leading up to the battle had a profound impact on the terrain around Plassey. The region, which is located near the Bhagirathi River, a distributary of the Ganges, is characterized by fertile plains and numerous water bodies. The incessant rains turned the ground into a quagmire, making it difficult for troops to move quickly and for artillery to be transported. For the British, who were advancing from Calcutta, the muddy and waterlogged terrain posed significant logistical challenges. The movement of their heavy artillery, which was crucial for their battle strategy, was severely hampered. The British had to rely on bullocks and elephants to pull their cannons through the mud, which slowed down their progress and made them vulnerable to ambushes. On the other hand, the Nawab's forces, who were more familiar with the local terrain, were better adapted to the conditions. However, the heavy rains also affected their ability to mobilize their troops effectively. The Nawab's army, which was larger but less disciplined than the British forces, faced difficulties in coordinating their movements due to the challenging terrain. Impact on supplies and logistics. The monsoon rains also had a significant impact on the supply lines of both armies. The British, who were operating far from their base in Calcutta, faced difficulties in maintaining a steady supply of food, ammunition, and other essentials. The rain-soaked roads made it difficult for supply wagons to move, and the risk of disease increased due to the stagnant water and high humidity. The Nawab's forces, although closer to their supply bases, also faced challenges in maintaining their logistics. The heavy rains disrupted the local economy, making it difficult to procure food and other supplies for the army. Additionally, the Nawab's treasury was under strain due to the ongoing conflict, which further exacerbated the supply issues. Impact on morale and health. The harsh weather conditions also took a toll on the morale and health of the soldiers on both sides. The constant rain, combined with the high humidity, created an uncomfortable and unhealthy environment. Soldiers were exposed to the elements, and the risk of diseases such as dysentery, malaria, and cholera increased significantly. For the British troops, who were not accustomed to the tropical climate of Bengal, the weather was particularly challenging. Many soldiers fell ill, and the overall morale of the troops was affected. However, the British commanders, particularly Robert Clive, were able to maintain discipline and keep their forces focused on the task at hand. The Nawab's forces, although more accustomed to the local climate, also suffered from the adverse weather conditions. The lack of proper shelter and medical care for the soldiers led to a decline in morale and combat effectiveness. Additionally, the Nawab's army was composed of a mix of regular troops and mercenaries, many of whom were not fully committed to the cause, further weakening their resolve. The weather on the day of the battle. The weather on the day of the Battle of Plassey, June 23, 1757, played a decisive role in the outcome of the battle. The day began with overcast skies and intermittent rain, which continued throughout the morning. The rain intensified as the battle progressed, creating challenging conditions for both sides. Impact on artillery and firearms. One of the most significant ways in which the weather influenced the battle was through its impact on the use of artillery and firearms. The British forces, who relied heavily on their superior artillery, faced difficulties in maintaining their cannons and muskets in the wet conditions. The rain made it difficult to keep the gunpowder dry, which was essential for the effective functioning of their weapons. However, the British had anticipated the challenges posed by the weather and had taken precautions to protect their gunpowder. They used tarpaulins and other coverings to keep their ammunition dry, which allowed them to maintain their firepower during the battle. This foresight gave the British a significant advantage over the Nawab's forces, who were less prepared for the wet conditions. The Nawab's artillery, which was less advanced than the British guns, was severely affected by the rain. Many of the cannons were rendered ineffective due to wet gunpowder, and the gunners struggled to keep their weapons operational. This lack of firepower significantly weakened the Nawab's ability to counter the British artillery, which played a crucial role in the outcome of the battle. Impact on cavalry and infantry movements. The rain also had a significant impact on the mobility of the cavalry and infantry on both sides. The muddy and waterlogged ground made it difficult for horses and soldiers to move quickly, which affected the ability of both armies to maneuver and respond to changing battlefield conditions. The British, who had a smaller but more disciplined force, were able to adapt to the challenging terrain more effectively. Their troops were trained to fight in close formation, which allowed them to maintain cohesion and discipline despite the difficult conditions. The British infantry, armed with muskets and bayonets, was able to hold their ground and repel several attacks by the Nawab's forces. The Nawab's cavalry, which was one of the strengths of his army, was severely hampered by the muddy ground. The horses struggled to gain traction, and the cavalry charges, which were a key part of the Nawab's battle strategy, were less effective than anticipated. The infantry, which was less disciplined and poorly trained, also faced difficulties in maintaining formation and coordinating their movements. Impact on visibility and communication. The rain and overcast skies reduced visibility on the battlefield, making it difficult for commanders to assess the situation and communicate with their troops. The British, who had a more centralized command structure, were able to maintain better control over their forces, despite the poor visibility. Robert Clive, who was known for his tactical acumen, was able to make quick decisions and adapt his strategy as the battle unfolded. The Nawab's forces, on the other hand, suffered from a lack of effective communication and coordination. The rain and poor visibility made it difficult for the Nawab's commanders to relay orders and coordinate their movements. This lack of coordination was exacerbated by the presence of mercenaries and irregular troops, who were less responsive to commands and more likely to act independently. The role of weather in the betrayal of Mir Jafar. One of the most critical factors in the outcome of the Battle of Plassey was the betrayal of Mir Jafar, one of Siraj-ud-Daulah's key commanders. Mir Jafar had secretly conspired with the British, agreeing to defect to their side in exchange for being made the new Nawab of Bengal. The weather conditions on the day of the battle played a role in facilitating this betrayal. The rain and poor visibility made it easier for Mir Jafar to conceal his intentions and avoid detection by Siraj-ud-Daulah and his loyal commanders. The chaotic conditions on the battlefield, combined with the lack of effective communication, allowed Mir Jafar to withdraw his troops from the fight without raising suspicion. This betrayal significantly weakened the Nawab's forces and left them vulnerable to the British attack. The British, who were aware of Mir Jafar's defection, were able to exploit the situation to their advantage. They focused their firepower on the remaining loyal troops of the Nawab, who were already struggling with the adverse weather conditions. The combination of superior firepower, disciplined troops, and the betrayal of Mir Jafar proved to be decisive in securing a British victory. The aftermath of the battle. The British victory at the Battle of Plassey had far-reaching consequences for the Indian subcontinent. It marked the beginning of British dominance in Bengal and laid the foundation for the eventual establishment of the British Raj. The weather conditions, which played a crucial role in the outcome of the battle, also had a lasting impact on the region. Impact on the monsoon season. The monsoon season, which had influenced the battle, continued to affect the region in the aftermath of the conflict. The heavy rains and flooding disrupted agriculture and trade, leading to economic hardships for the local population. The British, who now controlled Bengal, had to contend with the challenges of governing a region that was prone to seasonal flooding and other weather-related issues. Impact on military strategy. The Battle of Plassey also had a significant impact on military strategy in India. The British learned valuable lessons about the importance of logistics, supply lines, and the need to adapt to local weather conditions. These lessons would influence their approach to future military campaigns in India, including the Anglo-Mysore Wars and the Anglo-Maratha Wars. Impact on the Nawab's legacy. For Siraj-ud-Daulah, the defeat at Plassey was a devastating blow. The betrayal of Mir Jafar and the adverse weather conditions contributed to his downfall, but his legacy is also a reflection of the broader political and economic forces at play in 18th century India. The monsoon rains, which had played a role in his defeat, became a symbol of the unpredictable and uncontrollable forces that shaped the fate of rulers and empires. The Battle of Plassey is often remembered as a turning point in Indian history, marking the beginning of British colonial rule. While the battle is typically analyzed in terms of military strategy, political intrigue, and economic motives, the role of weather conditions in determining the outcome is an aspect that deserves greater attention. The monsoon rains, which created challenging terrain, disrupted supply lines, and affected the morale and health of the troops, played a crucial role in shaping the course of the battle. The British, who were better prepared for the adverse weather conditions and had the advantage of superior artillery and disciplined troops, were able to overcome the challenges posed by the monsoon. The Nawab's forces, on the other hand, were less prepared and more vulnerable to the impact of the rain and mud. The betrayal of Mir Jafar, facilitated by the poor visibility and chaotic conditions on the battlefield, further tilted the scales in favor of the British. In the end, the weather conditions at the Battle of Plassey were not just a backdrop to the conflict but an active participant in shaping its outcome. The monsoon rains, which are a defining feature of the Indian subcontinent, played a crucial role in determining the fate of empires and the course of history. As we reflect on the Battle of Plassey and its legacy, it is essential to recognize the influence of the natural world on human affairs and the ways in which weather can shape the destiny of nations. The role of the Jagat Seth banking family in the Battle of Plassey. The Battle of Plassey, fought on June 23, 1757, is often regarded as one of the most significant battles in the history of India. It marked the beginning of British dominance in India and set the stage for the eventual establishment of the British Empire in the subcontinent. While the battle itself was relatively small in terms of the number of troops involved, its political and economic ramifications were enormous. Among the many factors that contributed to the British victory, the role of the Jagat Seth banking family stands out as particularly crucial. This article delves into the intricate web of financial, political, and military maneuvers that characterized the Battle of Plassey, with a particular focus on the influence wielded by the Jagat Seth family. Historical context. The decline of the Mughal Empire. By the mid-18th century, the Mughal Empire, which had once been the dominant power in India, was in a state of decline. The central authority of the Mughal emperor had weakened, and regional powers such as the Marathas, the Nawabs of Bengal, and the Nizam of Hyderabad had risen to prominence. The British East India Company, which had initially come to India as a trading entity, began to take advantage of the political vacuum left by the declining Mughal Empire. The rise of the British East India Company. The British East India Company had established its presence in India through a series of trading posts and forts. By the early 18th century, the company had become a significant political and military force in India, particularly in the regions of Bengal, Madras, and Bombay. The company's primary objective was to maximize its profits through trade, but it soon realized that political control over Indian territories could significantly enhance its economic interests. The Nawabs of Bengal. Bengal, one of the richest provinces in India, was ruled by the Nawabs, who were nominally subordinate to the Mughal emperor but exercised considerable autonomy. The Nawabs of Bengal were known for their wealth, and the region was a major center of trade and commerce. The British East India Company had established a significant presence in Bengal, particularly in the city of Calcutta, now Kolkata, which served as the company's headquarters in India. The Jagat Seth family, a financial powerhouse. Origins of the Jagat Seth family. The Jagat Seth family, whose name translates to banker of the world, was one of the most influential banking families in 18th century India. The family's origins can be traced back to the early 18th century when Manik Chand, a banker from the Marwari community, established a banking house in Murshidabad, the capital of Bengal. The family quickly rose to prominence due to their financial acumen and close ties with the Nawabs of Bengal. The wealth and influence of the Jagat Seths. The Jagat Seth family amassed enormous wealth through their banking operations, which included money lending, currency exchange, and financing trade. They were the principal bankers to the Nawabs of Bengal and played a crucial role in managing the state's finances. The family's influence extended beyond finance. They were also involved in politics and had significant sway over the Nawab's decisions. The Jagat Seths and the British East India Company. The British East India Company recognized the importance of the Jagat Seth family in Bengal's financial and political landscape. The company sought to establish a close relationship with the Jagat Seths to secure their financial support and gain access to the family's extensive network of influence. The Jagat Seths, in turn, saw the British as a potential ally in their efforts to maintain their position of power in Bengal. The prelude to the Battle of Plassey. The ascendancy of Siraj-ud-Daulah in 1756. Siraj-ud-Daulah became the Nawab of Bengal after the death of his grandfather, Alivardi Khan. Siraj-ud-Daulah was a young and ambitious ruler who sought to assert his authority over the British East India Company. He viewed the company's growing influence in Bengal as a threat to his sovereignty and was determined to curb their power. The Black Hole of Calcutta. One of the key events that led to the Battle of Plassey was the capture of Calcutta by Siraj-ud-Daulah in June 1756. The Nawab's forces overran the British fort in Calcutta, leading to the infamous incident known as the Black Hole of Calcutta. According to British accounts, 146 British prisoners were confined in a small, poorly ventilated room, resulting in the deaths of 123 of them due to suffocation. While the accuracy of these accounts has been disputed, the incident served as a rallying cry for the British to retaliate against Siraj-ud-Daulah. The British response, Robert Clive and the recapture of Calcutta. In response to the capture of Calcutta, the British East India Company dispatched a force under the command of Robert Clive to retake the city. Clive, a seasoned military commander, successfully recaptured Calcutta in January 1757. Following this victory, Clive sought to consolidate British power in Bengal by neutralizing Siraj-ud-Daulah's threat. The conspiracy against Siraj-ud-Daulah. The role of Mir Jafar. One of the key figures in the conspiracy against Siraj-ud-Daulah was Mir Jafar, a senior military commander in the Nawab's army. Mir Jafar had grown disillusioned with Siraj-ud-Daulah's rule and saw an opportunity to advance his own interests by aligning with the British. Clive recognized Mir Jafar's potential as an ally and began negotiations with him to overthrow Siraj-ud-Daulah. The involvement of the Jagat Seth family. The Jagat Seth family played a pivotal role in the conspiracy against Siraj-ud-Daulah. The family had grown increasingly dissatisfied with the Nawab's policies, which they believed were detrimental to their financial interests. The Jagat Seth saw an opportunity to regain their influence by supporting the British and Mir Jafar in their bid to overthrow Siraj-ud-Daulah. The secret treaty. In June 1757, a secret treaty was signed between the British East India Company, Mir Jafar, and the Jagat Seth family. The treaty outlined the terms of their alliance, including the promise of financial support from the Jagat Seths and the appointment of Mir Jafar as the new Nawab of Bengal following Siraj-ud-Daulah's removal. The treaty also stipulated that the British would receive significant financial rewards and territorial concessions in exchange for their support. The Battle of Plassey. The forces involved. The Battle of Plassey was fought between the forces of the British East India Company, led by Robert Clive, and the army of Siraj-ud-Daulah. The British forces consisted of approximately 3,000 soldiers, including European troops and sepoys, Indian soldiers employed by the British. Siraj-ud-Daulah's army, on the other hand, numbered around 50,000 soldiers, including cavalry, infantry, and artillery. The role of the Jagat Seths in the battle. The Jagat Seth family's involvement in the Battle of Plassey was primarily financial. The family provided the British with the necessary funds to finance their military campaign against Siraj-ud-Daulah. This financial support was crucial in enabling the British to mobilize their forces and sustain their operations during the battle. The defection of Mir Jafar. One of the decisive factors in the Battle of Plassey was the defection of Mir Jafar and a significant portion of Siraj-ud-Daulah's army. As per the secret treaty, Mir Jafar and his forces refrained from engaging in combat, effectively neutralizing a large part of the Nawab's army. This betrayal left Siraj-ud-Daulah's forces severely weakened and demoralized. The outcome of the Battle of Plassey ended in a decisive victory for the British East India Company. Siraj-ud-Daulah's forces were routed, and the Nawab himself fled the battlefield. He was later captured and executed by Mir Jafar's forces. With Siraj-ud-Daulah's defeat, Mir Jafar was installed as the new Nawab of Bengal, and the British East India Company solidified its position as the dominant power in the region. The aftermath of the Battle of Plassey. The installation of Mir Jafar as Nawab. Following the Battle of Plassey, Mir Jafar was installed as the Nawab of Bengal, as per the terms of the secret treaty. However, Mir Jafar's rule was largely a puppet regime, with the British East India Company exercising significant control over the administration of Bengal. The British used their newfound power to extract substantial financial concessions from Mir Jafar, further enriching the company's coffers. The financial rewards for the British East India Company reaped enormous financial rewards from their victory at Plassey. In addition to the territorial concessions granted by Mir Jafar, the company received a substantial sum of money from the Jagat Seth family as part of their agreement. This influx of wealth allowed the British to further expand their operations in India and consolidate their power. The decline of the Jagat Seth family. While the Jagat Seth family played a crucial role in the British victory at Plassey, their influence began to wane in the aftermath of the battle. The family's financial support for the British had come at a significant cost, and they found themselves increasingly marginalized as the British tightened their grip on Bengal. Over time, the Jagat Seths lost much of their wealth and influence, and their once powerful banking empire declined. The long-term impact of the Battle of Plassey. The beginning of British dominance in India. The Battle of Plassey marked the beginning of British dominance in India. The victory at Plassey gave the British East India Company control over Bengal, one of the richest provinces in India. This control provided the company with a steady stream of revenue, which they used to fund further military campaigns and expand their territorial holdings. Over the next century, the British would go on to establish their empire in India, with the Battle of Plassey serving as a crucial turning point. The transformation of the British East India Company. The Battle of Plassey also marked a significant transformation in the nature of the British East India Company. Prior to Plassey, the company had primarily been a trading entity, focused on maximizing profits through commerce. However, the victory at Plassey demonstrated the potential for political and military power to enhance the company's economic interests. In the years following Plassey, the company increasingly shifted its focus from trade to territorial expansion and political control. The impact on Indian society and economy. The British victory at Plassey had far-reaching consequences for Indian society and economy. The British East India Company's control over Bengal led to significant changes in the region's economic structure, as the company sought to maximize its profits through exploitative practices such as heavy taxation and the forced cultivation of cash crops. These policies had a devastating impact on the local population, leading to widespread poverty and famine. The legacy of the Jagat Seth family. The Jagat Seth family's role in the Battle of Plassey is a testament to the complex interplay between finance, politics, and military power in 18th-century India. While the family's financial support was instrumental in securing the British victory, their subsequent decline highlights the precarious nature of their position. The Jagat Seth story serves as a reminder of the ways in which financial power can shape political outcomes, but also of the risks involved in aligning with foreign powers. The Battle of Plassey was a pivotal moment in the history of India, marking the beginning of British dominance in the subcontinent. The role of the Jagat Seth banking family in the battle underscores the importance of financial power in shaping political and military outcomes. The family's financial support for the British East India Company was crucial in securing their victory, but it also came at a significant cost. The decline of the Jagat Seth family in the aftermath of Plassey serves as a cautionary tale about the risks of aligning with foreign powers and the precarious nature of financial influence in a rapidly changing political landscape. In the broader context of Indian history, the Battle of Plassey and the role of the Jagat Seth family highlight the complex interplay between finance, politics, and military power. The battle set the stage for the eventual establishment of the British Empire in India, with far-reaching consequences for Indian society and economy. The legacy of the Jagat Seth family serves as a reminder of the ways in which financial power can shape historical events, but also of the risks and uncertainties that come with wielding such power. The Battle of Plassey and its contribution to the British East India Company's expansion in India. The Battle of Plassey, fought on June 23, 1757, is often regarded as one of the most significant turning points in the history of India. It marked the beginning of British dominance in the Indian subcontinent and set the stage for the eventual establishment of the British Empire in India. The battle, though relatively small in terms of the number of troops involved, had far-reaching consequences that reshaped the political, economic, and social landscape of India. This article will explore how the Battle of Plassey contributed to the British East India Company's expansion in India, examining the events leading up to the battle itself, and its aftermath. Historical context. The British East India Company, origins and early activities. The British East India Company, EIC, was founded in 1600 with the primary aim of engaging in trade with the East Indies, which included India, Southeast Asia, and China. Initially, the company focused on the spice trade, but over time, it expanded its interests to include textiles, tea, and other commodities. The EIC established its first factory, trading post, in India at Surat in 1612, and by the mid-17th century, it had established additional factories in Madras, 1639, Bombay, 1668, and Calcutta, 1690. The company's early activities in India were primarily commercial, and it operated under the protection of local rulers. However, as the EIC's wealth and influence grew, it began to involve itself in local politics, often playing one ruler against another to secure favorable trading conditions. This involvement in local politics would eventually lead to the company's transformation from a trading entity to a territorial power. The decline of the Mughal Empire. The Mughal Empire, which had ruled much of the Indian subcontinent since the early 16th century, began to decline in the early 18th century. The death of Emperor Aurangzeb in 1707 marked the beginning of a period of political fragmentation and instability. Regional powers, such as the Marathas, the Sikhs, and the Nawabs of Bengal, began to assert their independence, leading to a power vacuum that the EIC would eventually exploit. The rise of the Nawabs of Bengal. Bengal, one of the wealthiest and most fertile regions of India, was ruled by the Nawabs, who were nominally subordinate to the Mughal emperor but exercised considerable autonomy. By the mid-18th century, the Nawabs of Bengal had become increasingly powerful, and their control over the region's lucrative trade made them a key player in Indian politics. However, the Nawab's relationship with the EIC was often fraught with tension. The company's growing influence and its attempts to evade taxes and duties imposed by the Nawabs led to frequent conflicts. These tensions would eventually culminate in the Battle of Plassey. The road to Plassey. The EIC's growing influence in Bengal. By the mid-18th century, the EIC had established a significant presence in Bengal, with its headquarters in Calcutta. The company's trade in textiles, silk, and other goods had made it one of the wealthiest and most powerful entities in the region. However, the company's growing influence and its attempts to evade taxes and duties imposed by the Nawabs of Bengal led to increasing tensions. In 1756, Siraj-ud-Daulah, the young and ambitious Nawab of Bengal, ascended to the throne. Siraj was deeply suspicious of the EIC's activities and was determined to assert his authority over the company. He demanded that the EIC cease fortifying its settlements and pay the taxes and duties that it had been evading. When the company refused, Siraj decided to take action. The Black Hole of Calcutta. In June 1756, Siraj-ud-Daulah launched an attack on Calcutta, capturing the city and imprisoning a number of EIC officials and soldiers in a small, poorly ventilated room known as the Black Hole of Calcutta. The conditions in the room were horrific, and many of the prisoners died of suffocation and heatstroke. The incident, though its exact details are disputed, became a rallying cry for the British and galvanized their determination to retaliate. The British response, Robert Clive and the recapture of Calcutta. The EIC responded to the fall of Calcutta by sending a force under the command of Robert Clive, a young and ambitious officer who had already gained a reputation for his military prowess. Clive quickly recaptured Calcutta in January 1757 and then turned his attention to consolidating the company's position in Bengal. Clive recognized that the key to securing the EIC's dominance in Bengal lay in removing Siraj-ud-Daulah from power. To achieve this, he began to cultivate alliances with disaffected elements within Siraj's court, including Mir Jafar, the commander of Siraj's army. The Battle of Plassey. The prelude to the battle. By June 1757, Clive had assembled a force of around 3,000 men, consisting of British troops and sepoys, Indian soldiers employed by the EIC. Siraj-ud-Daulah, meanwhile, had gathered a much larger force of around 50,000 men, including cavalry, infantry, and artillery. However, Siraj's army was plagued by internal divisions, and many of his commanders were secretly in league with Clive. Clive's strategy was to exploit these divisions and to ensure that the battle would be decided not by sheer numbers, but by superior tactics and discipline. He also counted on the support of Mir Jafar, who had promised to defect to the British side during the battle. The Battle of Plassey was fought on June 23, 1757, near the village of Plassey, Palashi, in Bengal. The battle began with an artillery duel, during which the British guns proved to be more accurate and effective than those of the Nawab's forces. As the battle progressed, Mir Jafar and his troops held back, refusing to engage the British. This left Siraj's forces exposed and vulnerable. Clive, recognizing the opportunity, ordered a general advance. The British troops, supported by their artillery, quickly overwhelmed Siraj's forces, who began to retreat in disarray. By the end of the day, the British had achieved a decisive victory, with minimal casualties on their side. The aftermath of the Battle of Plassey had immediate and far-reaching consequences. Siraj-ud-Daulah fled the battlefield but was soon captured and executed by Mir Jafar's forces. Mir Jafar was installed as the new Nawab of Bengal, but he was little more than a puppet ruler, beholden to the EIC. The victory at Plassey gave the EIC control over Bengal, one of the wealthiest and most populous regions of India. The company was now in a position to exploit Bengal's resources and to use its wealth to further expand its influence in India. The EIC's expansion in India. The consolidation of power in Bengal. Following the Battle of Plassey, the EIC moved quickly to consolidate its power in Bengal. Mir Jafar, as the new Nawab, was forced to grant the company extensive privileges, including the right to collect taxes and duties on behalf of the Nawab. This gave the EIC control over Bengal's revenue, which it used to finance its military and administrative operations. The company also began to interfere in the internal affairs of Bengal, often to the detriment of the local population. The EIC's policies, particularly its land revenue system, led to widespread economic hardship and social unrest. However, the company's control over Bengal's resources allowed it to maintain its dominance and to expand its influence further. The expansion into other regions. With Bengal firmly under its control, the EIC began to expand its influence into other regions of India. The company's military forces, now well-funded and well-equipped, were used to conquer or subjugate neighboring states. The EIC's expansion was facilitated by the political fragmentation of India, as regional rulers often lacked the unity and resources to resist the company's advance. One of the key figures in the EIC's expansion was Robert Clive, who continued to play a leading role in the company's military and political affairs. Clive's victories in battles such as the Battle of Buxar, 1764, further strengthened the company's position and allowed it to extend its control over large parts of northern India. The EIC's transformation into a territorial power. The EIC's success in Bengal and its subsequent expansion marked a significant transformation in the company's role in India. No longer just a trading entity, the EIC had become a territorial power, with control over vast territories and millions of people. The company's administration in India was characterized by a combination of military force, political manipulation, and economic exploitation. The EIC's transformation into a territorial power was formalized in 1765, when the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II granted the company the Diwani, the right to collect revenue, in Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. This gave the EIC legal authority over these regions and further solidified its control. The impact on Indian society and economy. The EIC's expansion in India had profound and far-reaching consequences for Indian society and economy. The company's policies, particularly its land revenue system, led to widespread economic hardship and social disruption. The traditional agrarian economy of India was disrupted, and many peasants were reduced to poverty. The EIC's control over India's resources also had a significant impact on the country's economy. The company's focus on extracting wealth from India led to the depletion of resources and the decline of traditional industries. The EIC's policies also contributed to the deindustrialization of India, as the country's traditional textile industry was undermined by the influx of cheap British manufactured goods. The resistance to EIC rule. The EIC's expansion in India was not without resistance. Many Indian rulers and communities resisted the company's attempts to extend its control, leading to a series of conflicts and uprisings. One of the most significant of these was the Anglo-Mysore Wars, 1767 to 1799, in which the EIC fought against the Kingdom of Mysore, led by Tipu Sultan. Despite these challenges, the EIC was able to maintain and expand its control over India. The company's military superiority, combined with its ability to exploit divisions among Indian rulers, allowed it to overcome resistance and to establish itself as the dominant power in India. The long-term consequences of the Battle of Plassey. The establishment of British colonial rule in India. The Battle of Plassey marked the beginning of British colonial rule in India. The EIC's victory at Plassey gave it control over Bengal, which became the foundation for its subsequent expansion. Over the next century, the EIC would extend its control over most of the Indian subcontinent, either through direct conquest or through alliances with local rulers. The EIC's rule in India was characterized by a combination of economic exploitation, political manipulation, and military force. The company's policies had a profound impact on Indian society and economy, leading to widespread poverty and social disruption. However, the EIC's rule also laid the groundwork for the eventual establishment of the British Empire in India. The impact on Indian politics and society. The EIC's expansion in India had a significant impact on Indian politics and society. The company's policies, particularly its land revenue system, led to the decline of traditional Indian rulers and the rise of a new class of landowners who were loyal to the EIC. This shift in power had a profound impact on Indian society, as traditional social structures were disrupted and new forms of social and economic organization emerged. The EIC's rule also had a significant impact on Indian culture and identity. The company's policies, particularly its promotion of Western education and Christianity, led to the emergence of a new class of Indian intellectuals who were influenced by Western ideas. This new class would play a key role in the Indian independence movement, which eventually led to the end of British rule in India. The legacy of the Battle of Plassey. The Battle of Plassey is often seen as a turning point in Indian history, marking the beginning of British colonial rule and the end of Indian independence. The battle's legacy is complex and contested, with some viewing it as a symbol of British imperialism and others as a necessary step in the modernization of India. Regardless of one's perspective, it is clear that the Battle of Plassey had a profound and lasting impact on India. The battle set the stage for the EIC's expansion in India and the eventual establishment of the British Empire. It also marked the beginning of a new era in Indian history, characterized by the interplay of colonialism, resistance, and transformation. The Battle of Plassey was a pivotal event in the history of India, marking the beginning of British dominance in the subcontinent and setting the stage for the eventual establishment of the British Empire. The battle's outcome was determined not just by military prowess, but by political intrigue and the exploitation of internal divisions within the Nawab's court. The EIC's victory at Plassey gave it control over Bengal, one of the wealthiest and most populous regions of India, and provided the foundation for its subsequent expansion. The EIC's transformation from a trading entity to a territorial power had profound and far-reaching consequences for India. The company's policies led to widespread economic hardship and social disruption, but also laid the groundwork for the modernization of India. The legacy of the Battle of Plassey is complex and contested, but its impact on Indian history is undeniable. In the end, the Battle of Plassey was not just a military victory, but a turning point in the history of India, marking the beginning of a new era of colonialism, resistance, and transformation. The battle's legacy continues to shape the political, economic, and social landscape of India, and its impact is still felt today. The key strategies employed by Robert Clive during the Battle of Plassey. The Battle of Plassey, fought on June 23, 1757, is one of the most significant battles in the history of India and the British Empire. It marked the beginning of British dominance in India and set the stage for the eventual colonization of the subcontinent. The battle was fought between the British East India Company, led by Robert Clive, and the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Daulah, along with his French allies. The outcome of the battle was a decisive victory for the British, and it was largely due to the strategic brilliance of Robert Clive. This article will delve into the key strategies employed by Robert Clive during the Battle of Plassey, examining the political, military, and psychological tactics that led to his success. Background of the Battle of Plassey. Before delving into the strategies employed by Robert Clive, it is essential to understand the background of the Battle of Plassey. The mid-18th century was a period of intense rivalry between European powers in India, particularly the British and the French. The British East India Company and the French East India Company were vying for control over trade and territories in India. The Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Daulah, was a young and inexperienced ruler who had recently ascended to the throne. His relationship with the British East India Company was strained, particularly due to the company's fortification of Calcutta without his permission. The immediate cause of the Battle of Plassey was the Black Hole of Calcutta incident, where Siraj-ud-Daulah's forces captured Fort William in Calcutta and imprisoned British soldiers and civilians in a small, poorly ventilated room, leading to the deaths of many. This incident outraged the British, and Robert Clive was sent to Bengal to retaliate and restore British prestige. Robert Clive, the man and the leader. Robert Clive, often referred to as Clive of India, was a British officer and administrator who played a pivotal role in establishing British control in India. Born in 1725, Clive joined the British East India Company as a clerk but quickly rose through the ranks due to his military acumen and leadership skills. By the time of the Battle of Plassey, Clive had already gained a reputation as a skilled and daring commander. Clive's leadership style was characterized by his ability to inspire his troops, his strategic foresight, and his willingness to take calculated risks. He was also a master of psychological warfare, often using deception and misinformation to outmaneuver his enemies. These qualities would be crucial in his success at Plassey. Key strategies employed by Robert Clive: alliance building and diplomacy. One of the most critical strategies employed by Robert Clive was his ability to forge alliances and use diplomacy to his advantage. Clive recognized that the British forces were outnumbered and that a direct confrontation with Siraj-ud-Daulah's army would be risky. Therefore, he sought to weaken the Nawab's position by forming alliances with disaffected elements within the Nawab's court. Clive's most significant diplomatic achievement was his alliance with Mir Jafar, the commander of Siraj-ud-Daulah's army. Mir Jafar was dissatisfied with the Nawab's rule and was willing to betray him in exchange for the promise of becoming the new Nawab of Bengal. Clive secretly negotiated with Mir Jafar, offering him the throne in return for his support during the battle. This alliance was crucial because it ensured that a significant portion of the Nawab's forces would either remain neutral or actively support the British during the battle. Mir Jafar's betrayal effectively neutralized a large part of Siraj-ud-Daulah's army, giving Clive a significant advantage. Psychological warfare and deception. Clive was a master of psychological warfare, and he used deception to great effect during the Battle of Plassey. One of the key elements of his strategy was to create the impression that the British forces were stronger and more formidable than they actually were. This was achieved through a combination of misinformation, bluffing, and the use of psychological tactics to demoralize the enemy. For example, Clive spread rumors that the British had a large number of reinforcements on the way, which caused Siraj-ud-Daulah to hesitate and delay his attack. Clive also used his artillery to create the illusion of a larger force by firing rapidly and continuously, giving the impression that the British had more guns than they actually did. Additionally, Clive's decision to position his troops in a defensive formation, with their backs to the river, was a calculated move to make the British appear more confident and resolute. This positioning also had the psychological effect of making the Nawab's forces believe that the British were prepared to fight to the death, further demoralizing them. Effective use of artillery. Artillery played a crucial role in the Battle of Plassey, and Clive's effective use of his artillery was a key factor in his victory. The British forces were equipped with superior artillery compared to the Nawab's forces, and Clive made full use of this advantage. Clive positioned his artillery in a way that maximized its effectiveness, placing his guns on high ground to give them a clear line of fire over the battlefield. He also ensured that his artillery was well protected, with infantry units positioned to defend the guns from enemy attacks. The British artillery was used to devastating effect during the battle, causing significant casualties among the Nawab's forces and disrupting their formations. The continuous and accurate fire from the British guns also had a demoralizing effect on the enemy, further contributing to their eventual collapse. Exploitation of terrain. Clive's strategic use of the terrain was another key factor in his victory at Plassey. The battlefield was located near the village of Plassey, on the banks of the Bhagirathi River. Clive chose a defensive position with his back to the river, which provided several advantages. Firstly, positioning his troops with their backs to the river meant that they could not be easily outflanked by the Nawab's forces. This allowed Clive to concentrate his forces in a compact formation, making it easier to defend against enemy attacks. Secondly, the river provided a natural barrier that protected the British forces from being surrounded. This was particularly important given that the British were outnumbered, and being surrounded would have been disastrous. Finally, the terrain around Plassey was relatively open, with few obstacles that could impede the movement of the British artillery. This allowed Clive to deploy his guns effectively and maintain a clear line of fire over the battlefield. Timing and coordination. Timing and coordination were critical elements of Clive's strategy at Plassey. Clive understood that the success of his plan depended on the precise execution of his tactics, and he took great care to ensure that his forces were well coordinated and that his orders were carried out promptly. One of the key moments in the battle was when Clive ordered a feigned retreat to lure the Nawab's forces into a trap. This maneuver required precise timing and coordination, as the British forces had to appear to be retreating while maintaining their formation and readiness to counterattack. The feigned retreat was successful in drawing the Nawab's forces into a vulnerable position, where they were exposed to the full force of the British artillery. This maneuver caused significant confusion and disarray among the enemy ranks, leading to their eventual collapse. Exploitation of internal divisions. Clive's ability to exploit the internal divisions within the Nawab's court was another key factor in his success. Siraj-ud-Daulah's rule was marked by internal strife and discontent, with many of his courtiers and commanders dissatisfied with his leadership. Clive took advantage of this discontent by forming alliances with key figures within the Nawab's court, most notably Mir Jafar. By promising Mir Jafar the throne in exchange for his support, Clive was able to neutralize a significant portion of the Nawab's forces and ensure that they would not fight against the British. In addition to Mir Jafar, Clive also exploited the rivalry between Siraj-ud-Daulah and his uncle, Mir Jafar's brother, Miran. This internal division further weakened the Nawab's position and contributed to the overall success of Clive's strategy. Maintaining discipline and morale. Maintaining discipline and morale among his troops was another crucial aspect of Clive's strategy. The British forces were outnumbered and facing a formidable enemy, and it was essential that they remained disciplined and focused throughout the battle. Clive was known for his ability to inspire his troops and maintain their morale, even in the face of adversity. He led by example, often placing himself in the thick of the action and sharing the dangers faced by his men. This earned him the respect and loyalty of his troops, who were willing to follow him into battle. Clive also took steps to ensure that his troops were well prepared and well equipped for the battle. He made sure that they had sufficient ammunition and supplies, and he drilled them extensively to ensure that they were ready for the challenges they would face on the battlefield. Flexibility and adaptability. One of the hallmarks of Clive's leadership was his flexibility and adaptability. He was able to adjust his strategy in response to changing circumstances on the battlefield, and he was not afraid to take risks when necessary. For example, when the Nawab's forces launched a cavalry charge against the British lines, Clive quickly adapted his tactics to counter the threat. He ordered his infantry to form square formations, which were highly effective against cavalry charges. This quick thinking and adaptability helped to repel the enemy attack and prevent a potential breakthrough. Clive's ability to remain flexible and adapt to the situation was a key factor in his success at Plassey. It allowed him to respond effectively to the challenges posed by the enemy and to seize opportunities as they arose. Exploitation of enemy weaknesses. Clive was a keen observer of his enemy, and he was able to identify and exploit their weaknesses. One of the key weaknesses of Siraj-ud-Daulah's forces was their lack of cohesion and discipline. The Nawab's army was composed of a mix of regular troops, mercenaries, and feudal levies, which made it difficult to maintain a unified command structure. Clive exploited this weakness by targeting the less disciplined elements of the Nawab's army, particularly the feudal levies and mercenaries. These troops were more likely to break and flee under pressure, and Clive's artillery and infantry focused their fire on these units to cause maximum disruption. In addition to targeting the less disciplined troops, Clive also exploited the lack of coordination between the different elements of the Nawab's army. The Nawab's forces were not well coordinated, and this lack of coordination made it difficult for them to respond effectively to the British tactics. Use of intelligence and espionage. Clive's use of intelligence and espionage was another key element of his strategy. He understood the importance of having accurate and timely information about the enemy's movements and intentions, and he made extensive use of spies and informants to gather intelligence. Clive's network of spies provided him with valuable information about the Nawab's plans and the disposition of his forces. This allowed Clive to anticipate the enemy's moves and to plan his own strategy accordingly. In addition to gathering intelligence, Clive also used espionage to spread misinformation and sow confusion among the enemy. For example, he spread rumors that the British had a large number of reinforcements on the way, which caused Siraj-ud-Daulah to hesitate and delay his attack. Strategic retreat and feigned retreat. Clive's use of strategic retreat and feigned retreat was another key element of his strategy. A feigned retreat is a military tactic in which a force pretends to retreat in order to lure the enemy into a vulnerable position, where they can be counterattacked. Clive used this tactic to great effect during the Battle of Plassey. He ordered his forces to feign a retreat, which drew the Nawab's forces into a vulnerable position. Once the enemy was committed to the pursuit, Clive ordered his artillery to open fire, causing significant casualties and disrupting the enemy's formation. The feigned retreat was a risky maneuver, as it required precise timing and coordination. However, Clive's ability to execute this tactic successfully was a testament to his skill as a commander and his understanding of the battlefield. Exploitation of weather conditions. Weather conditions can play a significant role in the outcome of a battle, and Clive was able to exploit the weather to his advantage during the Battle of Plassey. The battle took place during the monsoon season, and the weather was hot and humid, with occasional rain showers. Clive recognized that the weather conditions would have an impact on the performance of the troops, particularly the Nawab's forces, who were not accustomed to fighting in such conditions. The heat and humidity would have sapped the energy of the troops, making them more susceptible to fatigue and dehydration. Clive's forces, on the other hand, were better prepared for the conditions. They had access to clean water and were more accustomed to fighting in the Indian climate. This gave them an advantage in terms of endurance and resilience, which Clive was able to exploit during the battle. Use of psychological pressure. Clive's use of psychological pressure was another key element of his strategy. He understood that warfare is not just about physical strength and firepower, but also about the psychological impact on the enemy. Clive used a variety of tactics to exert psychological pressure on the Nawab's forces. For example, he spread rumors about the strength and capabilities of the British forces, which caused the enemy to doubt their own abilities. He also used his artillery to create a constant and overwhelming barrage of fire, which had a demoralizing effect on the enemy. In addition to these tactics, Clive also used the threat of betrayal to exert psychological pressure on Siraj-ud-Daulah. The Nawab was aware that some of his commanders were dissatisfied with his rule and might be willing to betray him. This knowledge created a sense of paranoia and mistrust within the Nawab's camp, further weakening his position. Exploitation of political instability. Clive's ability to exploit the political instability within the Nawab's court was another key factor in his success. Siraj-ud-Daulah's rule was marked by internal strife and discontent, with many of his courtiers and commanders dissatisfied with his leadership. Clive took advantage of this instability by forming alliances with key figures within the Nawab's court, most notably Mir Jafar. By promising Mir Jafar the throne in exchange for his support, Clive was able to neutralize a significant portion of the Nawab's forces and ensure that they would not fight against the British. In addition to Mir Jafar, Clive also exploited the rivalry between Siraj-ud-Daulah and his uncle, Mir Jafar's brother, Miran. This internal division further weakened the Nawab's position and contributed to the overall success of Clive's strategy. Post-battle consolidation. Clive's strategy did not end with the victory at Plassey. He understood that the battle was just the beginning of the British campaign to establish control over Bengal, and he took steps to consolidate his gains and secure British dominance in the region. One of the key elements of Clive's post-battle strategy was the installation of Mir Jafar as the new Nawab of Bengal. This move was intended to ensure that the British had a friendly ruler in power who would be willing to cooperate with them. Clive also negotiated a treaty with Mir Jafar, which granted the British East India Company significant concessions, including the right to collect taxes and control trade in Bengal. In addition to installing a friendly ruler, Clive also took steps to strengthen the British position in Bengal. He reinforced the British garrison in Calcutta and established a network of alliances with local rulers and merchants. These measures helped to secure British control over the region and laid the foundation for the eventual colonization of India. The Battle of Plassey was a turning point in the history of India and the British Empire, and it was largely due to the strategic brilliance of Robert Clive. Clive's ability to forge alliances, use psychological warfare, exploit the terrain, and maintain discipline and morale among his troops were key factors in his success. His use of artillery, intelligence, and espionage, as well as his ability to adapt to changing circumstances on the battlefield, further contributed to his victory. Clive's victory at Plassey was not just a military triumph, but also a political and strategic one. By exploiting the internal divisions within the Nawab's court and securing the support of key figures like Mir Jafar, Clive was able to neutralize a significant portion of the enemy's forces and ensure the success of his campaign. His post-battle consolidation efforts further strengthened the British position in Bengal and set the stage for the eventual colonization of India. In conclusion, the key strategies employed by Robert Clive during the Battle of Plassey were a combination of military tactics, political maneuvering, and psychological warfare. His ability to outthink and outmaneuver his enemies, both on and off the battlefield, was a testament to his skill as a commander and his understanding of the complexities of warfare in 18th century India. The Battle of Plassey remains a classic example of how a smaller, well-disciplined force can defeat a larger, less cohesive enemy through superior strategy and leadership.